Okay. So hi everyone. My name's Thelini. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am the Faculty of Land and Food Systems Student Engagement Officer. So today we'll be going through the Dietetics application part one, resumes and requirements. And as I mentioned, at the end, we'll do some Q&A. So if you have any questions at any point, please don't hesitate to reach out. If you have specific questions about the program, my advice and my words of wisdom to all of you would be to reach out to the dietetics application and program team so that they could answer those questions for you as well. So as we get started today, I want to start off with a land acknowledgement. So UBC's Point Grey campus is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Our faculty is committed to working with Indigenous communities and students in our curriculum and our research, and the dietetics program is also committed to that work as well. Myself today, I am not on UBC's Point Grey campus, so I also want to acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of the lands that all of you are on, as well as the lands that I am situated on today. On the slide, you're going to see a link to nativeland.ca. For those of you who don't know whose land you're on, I encourage you to go to that link to find out whose land you're on and to find out more about the history of the land that you are on. As you embark on your application for the dietetics major, I encourage you to think about what does it mean to be a part of this program? What does it mean for you to learn on this land that has been a place of learning since time immemorial for First Nations people. And I encourage you to think about what does that mean for you as a potential dietitian in the future. So something to keep in mind as we go through the entire presentation today. So today we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk a lot about your resume and your application for the dietetics major. We're going to talk about when curating your application, understanding the audience, and thinking about the application and the review panel when thinking about that application. We're going to talk a little bit about the opportunity about applying for the dietetics major, things to keep in mind and things to know about the dietetics program when you are applying in. And then we're going to think and do some reflecting on your own personal experiences today. So thinking about what you can bring to the profession, what you are hoping to bring into the major, and then thinking about the program and how those align with your values as well. So today during the presentation, we're going to use Slido quite a bit. So I'm going to have you get out your phones, hopefully. If you're on your phone and listening to this presentation and you're not able to join on Slido, that's okay. But for those of you that are able to join, I'm going to ask you to scan this QR code and to use the number to join the Slido. So I'll give you about a minute to be able to do that. Great. So hopefully you've gotten a chance to add yourself to the Slido. So I'm going to start off with a question for all of you. So thinking about your application for the dietetics major, how are you feeling about writing your application? So think of a word that comes to mind for all of you. So I'll give you a minute. If you're not applying this year in 2025, again, thinking about the future, how do you feel in this moment? How are you thinking about it in the future? And starting to think about those words. What you'll notice on the screen is the words that are larger, more people have written. So you'll notice that anxious right now is a word that is quite large. There's also a few other words that are in there. Stressed is coming up, it seems. Lost seems to be a little bit, there's pressed for time that is also becoming a prevalent piece. So I'll give you about 10 more seconds if you have some thoughts to be able to add them in here. So as you can see, there's a lot of things that are coming up for a lot of you. There's a lot of similar emotions and similar tones that I feel that are coming through. So a lot of you are feeling anxious. A lot of you are feeling stressed, potentially pressed for time. There's some loss, there's some confusion, there's some thinking about writing with precision. My hope is that through this session that you'll feel a little bit more comfortable and confident in potentially how to write your application and how to put your best foot forward for the application for the major. I want you to know that by the end of this session, you're probably not going to be from 0 to 100 and feel 100% comfortable and confident. That's going to come with time as you start to write your application, as you start to edit it. Hopefully, you start to feel more confident about that application, but know that there are also many resources to help and support you along the way. This webinar is just one of the many resources. And so at the end, we'll talk about more resources that you can reach out to, as well as I put resources in the chat, and I'll put them also at the end for any of you who are continuing to look for support and resources as well. So again, my hope is that we can help clear up some of that and clear some more confidence. And as time, you'll become more comfortable and confident with the program. Also, what I encourage all of you to do is to talk to other people that have applied into the program and hear and learn from their experiences. There are many students who have gone through the experience just like you have, and I encourage you to chat with them about their experience to learn from their wisdom and the thoughts that they have, as well as reaching out to the additional resources that I mentioned. So, as you start to think about your application for the major, I encourage you to think about what is the reviewer looking for? What is the dietetics major and education team looking for when they are thinking and looking at your application? Those are things to keep in the back of your mind is who is reviewing this? What are they looking for? And what are they hoping for applications that they choose to move forward? So again, as I mentioned, there's some key resources for all of you to think about and include as you start to work towards your application. I threw some of the links just in the chat right now. So I encourage you all to keep those in the back of your mind and to click on them so that you have them on a web page for future reference. So some of the resources include the Dietetics Application Guide. So it's a few pages long, and the Dietetics team has been able to curate that to provide you with all of the information necessary for you to produce your application. There's a mandatory template for which your statement would be on. So your written statement, we're not going to talk a lot about it today, but there will be a session tomorrow about the application. And so I encourage you to think about what does that statement look like, and making sure that you use that mandatory template when you're doing your statement. Each of you who are applying in will have a dietetics application number. You will use that application number in all of your documents that you are completing and handing in. You're meant to anonymize everything so that nobody knows what they're looking at other than through your dietetics application number. As you think about the application and as you think about whether you would be a good fit and what your experiences, skills have brought you to this application, I encourage you to think about what they have mentioned as the required skills and abilities to be in the dietetics program and to be a dietitian in the future, and to see, do they align with your values? Do they align with your skills and abilities? And how do you ensure that you can convey that information to the adjudication team? The program has a mission, vision, values, and objectives. It's really important as an applicant that you understand what those mission, vision, values, and objectives are so that you can align your application with them. Thinking about how you can include the values in your written statement and throughout your application will be important in making sure that you understand that you are in alignment with the program, as well as that you understand how you would be a good fit for the program. So as we talk a little bit about your resume, there are some specific requirements that each of the resumes that you're completing need to have. So we're going to go through some of those requirements. You can also find these requirements on the application guidelines that the dietetics team has provided. So each resume is a maximum of 2 pages. So you can have more than 1 page, but 2 pages maximum. So the way I think about it in my head, if you were to print it out, it would be 1 page double-sided, But in a virtual situation, it would be 2 pages on a Word document or on a PDF document. If you have additional pages, say you end up having 3, 4, 5 pages, your extra pages will not be reviewed. So really remember, what are you highlighting in those 2 pages and how do you keep it concise, but ensure that you get all the details across that you're looking to get across to the adjudication panel. Making it often when we want to fill in and have all of the information in our resume, we like to make font size smaller and we like to make margins tiny. So we like to make margins like 0.25 margins, and we like to do like size 8, size 7 font. For the reader and for the adjudication team, that makes it really hard to read. So the requirement for your resume when you're applying into the dietetics program is that you use 1 inch margins and it's readable font that is no smaller than an 11 size font. So making sure that it's legible, that someone can read it, and it is easily accessible for somebody who is trying to read and understand the content that you're having within it. As I mentioned before, your dietetics application number is going to be really important because that's going to be on all of your documents to anonymize your documentation. So make sure that you don't have any identifying information. So when you think about your name, your signature, any contact information, where you live, if you're linking to like LinkedIn or a personal blog, social media that you have, you don't, if you have a website that you curate, any of those things you're going to want to leave off of your dietetics application in order to ensure that it is anonymized and you are following the guidelines of the application. So those are some things to keep in mind. As you apply, one big thing that I encourage all of you to keep in mind, that sometimes we can forget about because we create so many documents for the different things that you're doing, is when you are applying, you need to combine your written statement and your resume as one PDF for the final submission. So, and your applicant, the way you submit that document should be your dietetics application number. So say my dietetics application number is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is what I'm going to label my document with. It's not going to say Bellini Layton underscore student engagement officer. Because that will ensure that it is not anonymized and you are trying to make sure that everything you are submitting is anonymized. Any questions so far? Okay, we're gonna keep on keeping on. So as you think about your application, I encourage you to think about who is the audience in which you are creating this application for. So the dietetics team will have an adjudication committee for the application that you are submitting. So these are some things that have been taken from their website. These are things that you can also search and research for yourself. But I encourage you to know and understand what the vision, the mission, and the values of the major are. So the vision is inspiring learners to advance dietetic practice and food systems. The mission is to prepare learners for varied entry to practice roles in dietetics. They have 5 values: community focused, collaboration, inclusion, integrity, and justice. As you think about your own personal values and as your future values of a future dietitian, I encourage you to think about, do those values align with your values? And how do you speak in your application to the values, the vision, and the mission to ensure that you're aligning yourself with that application and with the program's objectives and what they seek as key pillars of their program. Questions about the vision, the mission, and the values of the dietetics program?
Hi, I actually do have a quick question.
Yeah.
So when we talk about how like vision, mission, and values play a part in how we'll develop in the program, would you recommend that we focus more as explaining how that impacts us while we're in the program as a student, or would it be more beneficial for us to look farther forward and say how those values help us as a dietitian once we've completed the practice and are working?
Yeah. So I think both of those things are really important to highlight. I think in your written statement, talking about how they align with you in your um, as who you are as a dietetic student and in your future career, and how they like will underline how you choose to show up in places and spaces as a future dietitian, I think is really important. So I think including both of them is important, and being able to talk about how they align with yourself. And so what does that future practice look like? How does it look like for you as a student? And how those things are important to you right now and what you will bring into the program as a result of that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
No problem. The other thing I would say is values. If you've worked collaboratively on teams, these are also places in your resume that you can also highlight. So maybe you've created collaborative communities of practice, or you've worked collaboratively with peers or colleagues on particular projects and assignments or pieces of work. You can also highlight these values in your resume so that they're highlighted there as well as in your written statement. So I encourage you to think about where you have done these things, where you hope to do these things, and what aligns with you as an individual and as a future dietitian. Any other questions? Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit more about understanding the job slash the opportunity. So thinking about in this situation in particular, understanding the opportunity of applying into the dietetics program and the application for the dietetics program. So there's a few things that you need to keep in mind as you understand what they're expecting from you and understanding what the program is, what the major is, and what you would do as a part of that community in the future. So we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the resume requirements. So making sure that you include the dietetics application number on the first page of your resume is going to be important. And then really specifically thinking about how can you quantify your experiences by providing the date and the date range, as well as the amount of hours that you've participated in. Your resume should not only showcase what you did, but showcase the values, the skills, and the abilities that you have learned from those experiences. We're going to talk a little bit about how you can develop those statements for your resume in the future, but ensuring that you meet those guidelines and ensuring that you're able to talk really heavily about what you have done and what you have learned and gained is going to be really important in setting yourself apart from your peers in the ways in which you talk about those experiences. Because what you learned and gained from an experience might be slightly different from what your colleagues or your peers have learned. And you want to emphasize those things in how you learn them and how you can take them into the program in the future. So if you go online, again, you will all be able to find some of these program objectives. I encourage you to do your research, as I mentioned before, and learn what these program objectives are. So, so program completion for students will be able to assess food and nutrition needs of individuals, communities, and populations as a part of interprofessional teams. Use an equity lens to promote and advocate for the health needs of individuals, communities, and populations, and provide culturally safe dietetic service to people from diverse socio-cultural backgrounds, including Indigenous peoples. So I encourage you to think about where are times that you have done some of these things, where are these objectives, how do they align with work that you have done or work that you hope to do, and do these align with things that you want to do as a part of the program? Going through the program, these are things that the program will hope to create space for you to be able to do. And if these things don't align with where you think you want to go, maybe the program isn't the right fit for you. So it's also about learning, is this program the right fit for me? Would I be able to accomplish all of my goals and objectives through applying through this program? And if so, what will that look like in the future? So again, there's a few more objectives that they have on their website. Again, I encourage you to just like Search it up in Google, search for them, read through them, make sure that you understand them and understand what they mean. And if you have questions about what they mean or what they're trying to say or accomplish, I would encourage you to reach out to the dietetics team, and I'll have their information at the end. And they're a good resource for you to be able to reach out to them and ask them, oh, I don't really understand what communicating nutrition information to a variety of audiences means. Can you give me some understanding and explanation about it? It's really important that you understand the program objectives so that you understand what you're applying into and that you're able to align those with the things that you're hoping to achieve through this program. As I mentioned, your resume should speak about skills and abilities that you have gained through previous experiences. In the dietetics program, there are required skills and abilities that they are hoping that each student has. And so these are some of the things that they're hoping students will have and learn in the program. So I encourage you to think about, have you done these things before? How do you hope to achieve these things in the future? And what does that look like for you to be able to speak to them in your resume and in your written statement? So some of the things are learn and apply the diverse foundational knowledge required for the dietetics profession, identify, obtain, and interpret relevant data, using a systematic approach to decision making to function in a complex, fast paced environment, developing effective communication and collaboration skills, demonstrating attitudes and behaviors that support inclusive, culturally safe, ethically dietetic practice. So thinking about are these things that I have exemplified or shown in different ways in the previous experiences that I've had? How do these align with the skills and abilities that I want to learn through this program and this major? And are these things that I would be interested and passionate about pursuing throughout my dietetics career? Any questions so far? Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit and do some reflection activities around some of your personal experiences and what you are hoping to bring from your personal experiences into the application. So we're going to draw some connections between what you have in the experiences, the skills, the values, the abilities, and what they are looking for and what they want in those applicants that are applying into the program. So what I'm going to get you to do is you can do this on your phone, you can do this on a piece of paper, whatever works for you. I want you to kind of make two columns in a chart. They can just kind of be two lists, but I want you to list down some of the things that you think that the dietetics team is looking for in applications. What are some of the things that they want applications to have? And then what I want you to think about is what are some things that you have in yourself? So I'm going to give you about a minute to take some time to be able to think about it and write some of these things down. In about a minute, I'm going to get you to share some of the things that you are hoping that the dietetics application team is looking for. I'm not going to ask you to share the things that you have, but I am going to get you to share the things that you think they are looking for. So be prepared to share in a second. Okay, so what I'm going to get you to do is don't press enter yet. I'm going to get you to go into the chat and I'm going to get you to write at least one statement. You can write more than one of what you think the dietetics team is looking for. So I'm going to get you to write it in the chat and don't press enter just yet. We're all going to press enter at the same time. So if you can write that into the chat, and then I'll give you about 15 seconds to write it into the chat, and then we'll all press enter when I say GO. Okay, and go. So as everyone is pressing enter, I'm encouraging you to take an opportunity to read them. I'm also going to read them out for all of you so that you can all see what's in the chat. So there's competence of skills for diverse applications within the field, variety of engagement within the community. They want diverse experiences that are related to the program objectives, applications who are respectful, knowledgeable, and can work with others, motivated and driven students. The dietetics program wants students to be able to show their ability to gather, interpret, and apply information. So all of the things that you all have listed are things I would say that the dietetics application team is looking for. As you can see, all of you interpreted that question slightly differently. Maybe there are things that overlap with things that you thought, and maybe there are things that were written that weren't things that you thought about that now you can add to things for you to think about for your application. So what I want you to now do is look at everything that other people have said, as well as the list that you have created for yourself about what they want. And as you think about what you have, I want you to think about how can you showcase your fit? So thinking about, I have this, they want this. How do I showcase the fit that I have through those matching of those different things? So I want you to take a minute to kind of do some reflection. So I'll give you about a minute for you to take some time to think about how can you showcase your fit with the things that they are looking for in the application. Okay. Hopefully you've gotten to write something down about how you can showcase your fit. What I'm going to talk to you about are two different methods in which you can use those things and how you can describe them in an effective manner in your resume. Uh, so one method is the CAR method. If you've heard of the CAR method, can you give me a thumbs up? Getting a little bit of a thumbs up. So the CAR method is one way that you can use to describe the things that you have accomplished in your resume. So the CAR method, it's called the CAR method because each of those words stands for something. So challenge, action, result. So when you think about the challenge in a particular situation, what was something that you had to do? What was a challenge that you had? What were you assigned to do? What was your responsibility? What was that task? Then I want you to think about the action. What specific actions did you take? What was your approach to the task that you had? How did you ensure that you were going to be successful in that task? And what were the things that you did? What were the steps that you take? What were the steps that you took? And what were the actions that you took for those challenges, the tasks that you were presented with? Then I want you to think about the results. What was the impact that you had? This could have been on people, on processes, on a responsibility. This can have quantifiable or qualitative successes and results. But I want you to think about what was the impact? How did it impact in the moment, in the future, in the long term, in the short term? And think about that. So when you're writing a statement in your resume, using the CAR method can help to ensure that you are being really specific. You're talking about a task, you're talking about the actions that you took, and you're talking about the results. And you're talking about them in a quantifiable or qualitative way that is very specific to what you did as an individual. The other way that you can talk about things in your resume is something called accomplishment statements. How many of you have heard of accomplishment statements? Give me a thumbs up in the chat. So some of you have heard of accomplishment statements. So accomplishment statements are a different method. There's the CAR method, there's accomplishment statements. There's a few different ways, but these are the two I think that work most effectively often when writing your resume. So again, thinking about the verb, thinking about the task and the result of an accomplishment, and that will result in you being able to specifically mention what you did and the impact that you had. So, an example is below. So, say you were working with youth and you were developing some curriculum and you were trying to explain what was that curriculum and what was the role that you had in it and with the youth. So, this is a specific example. You developed age appropriate lesson plans for youth ages 8 to 10 in order to improve access to core nutrition concepts. Do you see how that is specific and that tells you what you did, what you accomplished, and what the result was for those that were involved? If I just said I developed yes, lesson plans for youth, that's really vague. And when somebody is adjudicating your statements, what you don't want them to do is you don't want them to be able to make assumptions from what you're saying. You want to ensure that you are being really specific so that when they go and they go through your resume, they know exactly what you did, how you did it, what you accomplished, and what you contributed to a specific task, project, portfolio, etc. If they have to make assumptions, sometimes the assumptions that they make about the work that you did could be very different. If I just said I made lesson plans for youth, maybe they thought it was from like 5 to 7 year olds. Maybe they thought I just like made one piece of a lesson plan because I didn't talk about what I did and how the lesson plan had the improved, sustained long term impact and what that did. You also talked in this statement, it also talks about developing it. If you said, I made lesson plans for youth or I ran lesson plans for youth, I then maybe you just ran them, you didn't actually build them and develop them. So it's really understanding that you developed them, that you were able to maybe facilitate them, and being specific in what you did. So what I'm going to get you now to do is I want you to think about your personal experiences. I want you to think about different things that you've done that would align with things that you would put in your resume when you're applying to the dietetics major. And I want you to come up with either one CAR statement or an accomplishment statement for yourself. So again, you can write this down on your phone, on a piece of paper. You can think about it. And then what I'm going to encourage you to do in a minute or two is I'm going to encourage you, if you are wanting to share with the group, you can share with the group, and then we and I can help to see if there's any refinement necessary for your CAR or your accomplishment statement that you have. So I'm going to get you to take a minute and take some time to be able to write that CAR or accomplishment statement. So I'll give you some time right now. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next slide. It's a Slido slide. And what I want you to do is, if you feel comfortable, I want you to share one that you have, and then we will be able to support you, and I'll be able to give you some feedback or advice on it. I'll give you so someone wrote inside, developed and hosted a workshop focused on dietary fiber for campus students to address misconceptions and improve food literacy. So what I would say is this is a good statement, but it could be a little bit more specific. So developed and hosted. When I think of hosted, I don't think that did you provide the content? Were you the facilitator? Facilitated is often a more specific word than hosted that you can use if you're the one who facilitated the workshop and managed the workshop. You talked about it was focused on dietary fiber for campus students. So when you're talking about campus students, is this two students? Is this 21 students? Is this 250 students? So being able to think about what is that number and what is that impact of that number that you had. And then at the end, it talks about to address misconceptions and improve food literacy. And so maybe it's to address and to dispel misconceptions because then you're addressing them, you're able to dispel the misconceptions that people had and to improve people's understanding of food literacy. Is it to improve their knowledge, to improve their cultural understanding? So being really specific in the language that you use to be able to showcase what you did and what you accomplished. Great. So there's another one in the chat that said, strategize channel development plan for client using foundational tools to conceptualize content and media strategy, which can be consistently applied. Not direct experience, but it can be applied because a foundational strategy approach for client. I think there's lots of things that like sometimes we think that only things in the nutrition realm can be applicable to your experience or your application for dietetics. All of the things that you've done independently and in group settings, whether they be nutrition focused or not, can have an impact on your application and can showcase the experiences and things that you've learned. They don't always just need to be in a nutritional setting. And I think that's often a misconception when students are applying into the program. What I would say about this is you strategize the channel development plan for the client? Did you present it to the client as well? Did you collaboratively build it? Strategized sounds to me like you were part of the brainstorming process, but I don't know the full process and pieces that you were a part of. It talks about using foundational tools. What are those foundational tools? What I think is the foundational tool versus what you think might be very different. So being specific with the tools and resources that you did to conceptualize the content and media strategy. And then you didn't really talk about the content and the media strategy. What was that strategy? and how was it beneficial? And it says it can be consistently applied to future programming, to future communication campaigns. And so, again, being really specific about what is that result and what is that impact on a small and large scale that you had in that role and with that task. Okay, I'll give it like 5 more seconds if anyone else wants to share one and get some feedback. Hopefully, the two people that shared, thank you for being brave and being willing to share. My hope is that you got some good feedback that you can use and leverage for your application and understand how important it is to be specific. Great. There's another person that just added something in here. It said, developed a virtual hands-on cooking class and facilitated the workshop focusing on safe food preparation and nutrition, and facilitated the workshop for athletes with intellectual disabilities in BC to make cooking more accessible for the transition to independent living. What I would say is this is a pretty long statement. You could probably break this up into one or two, an additional like two sentences instead of one. Again, when you're talking about you developed a virtual hands-on cooking class, you facilitated that, so that's really helpful in understanding. It focused on safe food preparation and nutrition. Um, and why is it important that people understand about safe food preparation and nutrition? You can talk and mention the importance of, because you talked about how cooking more accessible, but safe food preparation and nutrition can ensure long-term health benefits for X, Y, and Z. You also talked about facilitating the workshop for athletes. It doesn't talk about the number of athletes that you were facilitating it for. So being specific in how you facilitated that workshop. You talked about that the athletes were with intellectual disabilities in British Columbia to make cooking more accessible for their transition to independent living. And so why is it important to have access to resources for these athletes? And being really specific in the ways in which you describe what that looks like. The other thing that you can talk about is the different values of dietetics. I think there are some values in which are being emphasized in this accomplishment statement and in this CAR statement that you can leverage heavily by being really specific during it. Hopefully that's helpful.
I have a question.
Yeah.
For experience that isn't directly related to nutrition or health, um, if we do a good enough job or well enough job in terms of actually explaining the work that we do in detail, do we have to also um, kind of explain why it would be transferable to the dietetics realm, or is that something that can just be seen if we kind of explain the work in detail itself?
Yeah. So in your resume, you don't need to make the like, oh, because I did this in X, Y, and Z setting, it would also be applicable to dietetics in X, Y, and Z. You can talk about in your written statement that these experiences have given you a strong foundation to be able to go into the dietetics program, but you don't need to make that full thread through as long as you're able to speak to the skills, abilities, um, and things that you have developed as a result. Hopefully that answers your question. Let me know if you have an additional one.
Yes, no, that's perfect. Thank you.
No worries. Great. So I'll give it a few more seconds in case anyone else is typing something through, and then we can keep on moving forward. Great. So there's an additional person that just put it in. Same sender as before, but they're refining the text. I think that's really helpful. So created and facilitated a dietary fiber workshop to 9 university students. So again, there was campus students, I believe, before. Oh, sorry. Sorry. I'm clearly. There was campus students before, and now it is university students. So I think that's really helpful. Dispelling misconceptions and applying fiber properties to constipation, obesity, diabetes, and cancer. And so I think it talks about dispelling the notions and applying fiber properties. The other additional piece I would add is creating long-term like impacts on their nutrition. So what is that long-term and what is that impact that you're having moving forward? Because I think you dispelled and you did the things of dispelling misconceptions and showing them how to apply fiber properties to these things. But what is that long-term impact? Is it providing them knowledge that they can use moving forward in their health decisions and in their nutrition decisions? And so being really specific in also adding in that component. Hopefully that helps. If you have any additional ones, I encourage you to talk to your peers, have others edit it, and we'll talk about other places where you can get some additional feedback. But hopefully this gives you all an idea of how you can use a CAR and accomplishment statement and how you can ensure that you're making it really effective for the message you're trying to get across. The other thing I want you to think about when you're thinking about creating accomplishment statements or CAR statements is thinking about these questions. So when you create those different statements, really ask yourself, did you do these things? How did you do it? Why was it important? What happened as a result of it? What was the context? What was the results, the numbers, the increases? And so making sure that when you write your statements, you're being really specific so that the it showcases the importance of all of these different things is what I encourage you to keep in your mind as you go through it. Questions about accomplishment statements. Okay. I encourage you again, be really specific. You don't want the adjudication committee to have to make assumptions because sometimes those assumptions will not benefit you or speak to the breadth and scope of the experiences, the skills, and the abilities that you have as an applicant going in. As you think about your application, the thing I encourage you to think about is keeping in mind some key resources and details as you go through the application. So we talked a lot about the ways in which you can refine your resume, the ways in which you're going to be really specific in your resume. If you're looking for some additional help, I mentioned the Dietetics application guide at the beginning. Again, make sure you read that document front to back to front, and you know what they are expecting of you, and you know what they are wanting you to include in your application. There's also a required skills and abilities doc. Go through that document and think about where have you exemplified and showcased those skills and abilities, and how can you ensure to speak about them. It doesn't always need to be in a nutrition setting or in a dietitian setting, in a hospital or a clinic setting. It can be in a different team environment and a different independent working environment that you have worked at. It's just about being able to showcase that you do have those skills and those abilities and experiences. Again, make sure that you understand the program's mission, values, vision, and objectives, and making sure that you thread those through in the different things that you speak about in your resume and the different things that you speak about in your written statement to ensure that you have an application that is in alignment with what they are looking for. If you are looking for some additional support in addition to what we have chatted about today, you're looking for someone to read through your application, to read through your accomplishment statements and your CAR statements, and to see if they're effective, I would encourage you to go to the UBC Career Center drop-in sessions that they have at Brock Hall. If you don't know what time they are, what you can do is just, again, go into Google, type in UBC Career Center, drop in hours, and it'll be able to give you the times and dates for the hours for the rest of December before we're closed on the December 24th. And then also we'll all be back as staff. We're typically back January 2nd. So I encourage you to think about when you would like to work on those, when will you have a document that you'll be able to showcase to somebody, and then set up an appointment or go to a drop-in setting that makes sense with what is the timing that you're looking for. If you do have specific questions about the dietetics program, about the application process, about what they're looking for, the dietetics admissions team is your best resource, and I would encourage you to reach out to them. If you reach out to them the day before or the 3 days before applications are due, you might not get the answer you want in the time you need it. So make sure that you're asking those questions early so that you're able to get the answers that you need to be able to effectively do your application.
I have a question.
Yeah.
For the dietetics admissions support, if you wanted someone to review your submission and stuff, would that be kind of like compromising the anonymous aspect of things if you're sending it to them or wanting that support prior
They
to?
won't be able to, because they are part of the admissions team, they would not be able to review your application beforehand. So if
Mhm.
you are looking for somebody to review your application beforehand, my suggestion would be to go to the UBC Career Center and go to one of their drop-in sessions, and that team would be able to support you with reviewing it.
Mhm. Is there any way that we can get private support?
What do you mean by private support?
Like drop-in sessions, would that be private or is it like kind of like a Zoom meeting like this?
It's normally one-on-one.
Oh, okay, perfect.
So they're not like they're individualized, if that makes sense.
Mm,
They're not like in a group setting. They are individualized. So there's drop-in sessions as well as booked appointments that you can book that you would be able to showcase. Because I know it can also be really vulnerable to showcase your own application. So you can bring in your own application to that session, and it would be typically one-on-one with a career advisor to be able to support you in the development of your application.
perfect, thank you.
No problem. Okay. Well, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate you spending some time chatting with me, being willing to discuss and chat. As I mentioned, these slides will be available for all of you afterwards. And I will be sticking around if you have any questions. But again, thank you for joining me today.